Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Charlene and this is Coffee and a Book. So today I'm going to be sharing with you a bookshelf tour. I thought this would be a really good way to let you guys see the types of books that I own, the types of books that I read, and I'll also be specifically talking about the books on my shelves that I haven't read yet. So this video is probably going to take long enough. Let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so these are the bookshelves that you've been seeing behind me. And we will just go through these shelves one by one. Unfortunately, this is as close to the top shelves as I can get. My tripod doesn't go any higher. So the first set of shelves we have are my classics. And these are first sorted by the edition that I have, at least if I have more than one in that edition. And then they are sorted by author. So over here to start, we have my Barnes & Noble leather-bound classics, and we have The Arabian Nights translated by Sir Richard F. Burton. They are anonymous, we don't know who wrote them. I have the complete Hans Christian Andersen fairy tales, and I have a treasury of classic poetry by mostly various American and British authors. Next to that, I have my Word Cloud Classic editions. And in these, I have The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert, and The Hunchback of Notre Dame and Les Mis by Victor Hugo. Then the next section are my Chartwell Classics. I have Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, and Moby Dick by Herman Melville. And then lastly, we have the start of my Barnes & Noble Classic editions. And in this one, we have The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Volume 1. I used to have Volume 2, but I had it in hardback and I haven't yet bought Volume 2 in this paperback edition. Then we have Sentimental Education by Gustave Flaubert, Test of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. I'm just going to say The Dangerous Liaisons by, I'm probably going to butcher this, I'm sorry, Pierre Choderlos de Laclos. I have no idea how to say that in French, I'm sorry. And The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. Now, on the shelf out of all these books, I have not yet read The Arabian Nights. I have not read anything in a treasury of poetry. A treasury of classic poetry. I have not read The Count of Monte Cristo. I have not read Wuthering Heights. And I have not read Sentimental Education or Dangerous Liaisons. All right, on the next shelf, we continue on with my Barnes & Noble Classic editions. And over here, we start with Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott. Then we have The Red and the Black by Stendhal. Then Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. Then Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray. A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain. Candide by Voltaire. And The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Then I have these Penguin Classic Deluxe editions of the Iliad and the Odyssey, both by Homer. Then I have a couple Oxford World Classics. First I have 4 Comedies by Plautus. So these are 4 plays. And I have, I don't know how to say this either, The Viscount of Bragelonne. Again, my French is horrible, by Alexandre Dumas. All right, the rest of these, up until the plays at the end, I don't have multiple books in these editions, so I'm not going to mention the editions themselves, but next we have Great Expectations by Charles Dickens and David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. Metamorphoses by Ovid. Shogun by James Clavell. The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. And A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. The last two on this shelf are the first of my Folger Library editions of Shakespeare plays, and we have The Taming of the Shrew and The Merchant of Venice. On this shelf, the books I haven't read are Ivanhoe, The Red and the Black, Vanity Fair, The Iliad. I have not read it in its entirety, only part of it. Four Comedies, The Viscount of Bragelonne, Great Expectations, David Copperfield, Metamorphoses, Shogun, The Outsiders, and Taming of the Shrew. Okay, this shelf's a little brighter. So on this shelf we go from my classics to my adult sci-fi fantasy. So we finish out the Folger Library editions with As You Like It, Hamlet, Richard III, Macbeth, which is in the wrong spot, The Winter's Tale, and Cymbeline. So how I have these ordered is comedies are first, then it's supposed to be tragedies, which is why Macbeth and Richard III are flip-flopped. Then it's supposed to be histories, and then the romance plays. After that, I have a collection of short stories by Nathaniel Hawthorne and a collection of poetry by Robert Frost. And that's the end of the classics. So, of the classics, the only one that I haven't read is Hawthorne short stories. I'm in the middle of it, but I haven't finished it yet. Then we get to the start of my adult sci-fi fantasy collection. And first we have Douglas Adams' The Ultimate Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is all 5 books and a short story. Deviation by Amy Alwarden, which is the second book in the Raven vs. Crow series. The first book I currently have loaned out to somebody else. Forward the Foundation by Isaac Asimov, which is the first of the Foundation prequels, as well as the original Foundation trilogy. The Cruel Stars by John Birmingham, which is the first in a series of the same title. The Aeronaut's Windlass and The Olympian Affair by Jim Butcher, which are the first 2 books in the Cinderspire series. And then Thief's Magic, Angel of Storms, and Successor's Promise by Trudy Canavan, which are the first 3 books in the Millennium's Rule series. And of the sci-fi fantasy, the only ones I haven't read yet are Deviation, The Cruel Stars, and The Olympian Affair. All right, this next shelf, the next one starts the second row. And on this shelf, we have a continuation of my adult sci-fi fantasy. So we have The Maker's Curse by Trudy Canavan, which is the 4th and final book in the Millennium's Rule series. Ender's Game and Speaker for the Dead by Orson Scott Card, which are the first 2 books in the Ender Saga, I think is what it's called. Clytemnestra by Costanza Casati. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clark. Timeline by Michael Crichton. Mystic by Jason Denzel. Then the 3 of the books in the William Shakespeare's Star Wars series, the ones that are based on the original 3 movies. Breach of Peace by Daniel B. Green. Malice by John Gwynne, which is the first book in the Faithful and the Fallen series. Royal Assassin and Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb, and Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. Royal Assassin and Assassin's Quest are the 2nd and 3rd books in the Farseer trilogy. Ship of Magic is the first book in the Live Ship Traders trilogy. And the reason I don't have Assassin's Apprentice is because the copy I did have was a whole lot shorter than these 2 books, and I've been meaning to replace it and just haven't yet. Then over here we have The Eye of the World, The Great Hunt, and The Dragon Reborn, the first 3 books in the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. And on this shelf, the books I haven't read yet are Maker's Curse, Clytemnestra, Mystic, Breach of Peace, Malice, Assassin's Quest, and Ship of Magic. Alright, sorry about the glare on these. But the next shelf is still all adult sci-fi and fantasy. And we start with The Shadow Rising, The Fires of Heaven, Lord of Chaos, Crown of Swords, The Path of Daggers, Crossroads of Twilight, and Knife of Dreams by Robert Jordan, which are the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 10th, and 11th books in the Wheel of Time series. I don't have book 9 yet. Perelandra by C.S. Lewis. The first book in this trilogy is out on loan, but this is the second book in the Space Trilogy. His Majesty's Dragon and Throne of Jade. The third book should be on this shelf, but I'm currently reading it, so it's missing at the moment. The Light Fantastic by Terry Pratchett, which is the second book in the Discworld series and the second book in the Rincewind series. Ariadne and Electra by Jennifer Saint. And then the start of by Brandon Sanderson. We have Elantris, Mistborn or the Final Empire, The Well of Ascension, Hero of Ages, Shadows of Self, and Bands of Mourning. Elantris is the first book in its series. The Final Empire, Well of Ascension, and Hero of Ages are the 3 books in Mistborn Era 1. And Bands of Mourning and Shadows of Self and Bands of Mourning are books 2 and 3 in the Mistborn Era 2 series. I don't own book 1 yet, though I have read it. The books on the shelf that I haven't read yet are the 4th through 11th books in the Wheel of Time series, Perelandra, The Light Fantastic, Ariadne, and Electra. And on this shelf, I will be finishing up the adult sci-fi fantasy and starting in on the YA. So, to start with, we have The Lost Metal, Warbreaker, Way of Kings, and Words of Radiance, Tress of the Emerald Sea, Frugal Wizard's Handbook to Medieval England, and Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, all by Brandon Sanderson. So, The Lost Metal is the 4th and final book in Era 2. Warbreaker is currently a standalone, though he's talked about making it into a series. The Way of Kings and Words of Radiance are the first 2 books in the Stormlight Archives. And then Tress, Frugal Wizard, and Yumi are all standalones, though Tress and Yumi are Cosmere books. Then we have The Silmarillion, The Hobbit, and the 3 Lord of the Rings books, The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien. And that is the end of my sci-fi fantasy books. So out of these books, the ones I haven't read are The Lost Metal, Words of Radiance, Tress of the Emerald Sea, The Frugal Wizard's Handbook to Medieval England, and Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. Now, on to the YA sci-fi fantasy. We have The Stolen Kingdom, The Jenny Key, The Cursed Hunter, and The Enchanted Crown by Bethany Atazadeh. And these are all 4 books in the Stolen Kingdom series. Then we have A Time to Speak and A Time to Rise by Nadine Brandes, which are the 2nd and 3rd book in the Out of Time trilogy. I need to get the 1st book, but I don't have it yet. And finally, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, which is the prequel to The Hunger Games. And out of the books on this shelf, in the YA section, I have read all of these. All right, this next shelf is now the 3rd level down. So we're continuing on with my YA sci-fi fantasy. And we have A Winter's Promise, The Missing of Claire de Lune, The Memory of Babel, and The Storm of Echoes by Christelle Debeau, which are the first 4 books in the Mere Visitors series. Then we have Spellslinger, Shadow Black, Charmcaster, Soulbinder, and Queenslayer by Sebastian de Castell, which are the first 5 books in the Spellslinger series. Then we have Entwined by Heather Dixon, Shielded by Kaylin Flanders, which is the first book in the Shielded series, or duology. The Book Jumper and The Forgotten Book by Mechthild Glezer. The European Travels of the Monstrous Gentlewoman by Theodora Goss, which is the 2nd book in the Extraordinary Adventures of the Athena Club series. My Plain Jane by Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton, and Jody Meadows, which is the 2nd book in the My Lady Janies series. The Kingdom of Back by Marie Lu. Silo and Storm by DJ McHale, which is which are the first two books in the Silo trilogy, and Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. So from this shelf, the books that I haven't read are The Storm of Echoes, Shadow Black, Charmcaster, Soulbinder, and Queenslayer, Shielded, The Book Jumper, The European Travels of the Monstrous Gentlewoman, Silo, Storm, and Spinning Silver. All right, the next shelf is the end of my YA sci-fi fantasy section, and then we'll be moving into historical fiction. So first we have A Forger of Roses by Jessica S. Olson, The Kiss of Deception, The Heart of Betrayal, and The Beauty of Darkness by Mary E. Pearson, which are the three books in the Remnant Chronicles, The Glasstown Game by Catherine M. Valenti, and The Queen's Poisoner by Jeff Wheeler. And on this shelf, the books I haven't read are The Glasstown Game and The Queen's Poisoner. Now on to the historical fiction section. We have Gods and Kings, Song of Redemption, Strength of His Hand by Lynn Austin, which are the first three books in the Chronicles of the Kings series. The Cairo Curse by Pepper Basham, which is the second book in the Frederick and Grace Mysteries. Glamorous Illusions and Grave Consequences by Lisa T. Berggren, which are the first two books in the Grand Tour series. Then we have Hotel Moscow by Talia Carter. Then The Last Kingdom, The Flame Bearer, Sword of Kings and Warlord by Bernard Cornwell. I know Last Kingdom is the first. I don't know what number the other three are, but they're later in the series. The Fort and Fools and Mortals, also by Bernard Cornwell. And then Counted with the Stars, which is the first book in the Out from Egypt trilogy by Connellan Cosette. And of the historical fiction, the ones I haven't read are these three books by Lynn Austin, The Cairo Curse, Grand Illusions and Grave Consequences, Hotel Moscow, and all of the Bernard Cornwell books. All right, so continuing on with the historical fiction section, we have Shadow of the Storms and Wings of the Wind by Connellan Cosette, which are the second and third books in the Out from Egypt trilogy. Then we have Shelter of the Most High and Until the Mountains Fall, also by Connellan Cosette, which are the second and third books in the Cities of Refuge series. I gave away the first book. I need to get a new copy of it. Then we have To Dwell Among Cedars and Between the Wild Branches by Connellan Cosette, which are the two books in the Covenant House duology. Then we have The White Princess, The King's Curse, The Other Boleyn Girl, The Boleyn Inheritance, and The Taming of the Queen by Philippa Gregory. These are all the books that I have kept from the series that I actually enjoyed. Then we have The Road to Jerusalem by Jan Guilou. I have no idea how to say that, I'm sorry, which is the first book in the Crusades trilogy. Then The Nightingale, The Four Winds, and The Women by Kristen Hanna. And finally, Egypt's Sister, Judah's Wife, Jerusalem's Queen, and King's Shadow by Angela Hunt, which are the four books in the Silent Years series. So on this shelf, the books that I haven't read are Until the Mountains Fall, To Dwell Among Cedars, Between the Wild Branches, The Road to Jerusalem, The Women, and the four books in the Silent Years series. All right, so going down another row, we have more historical fiction. So we have A Woman of the Word by Angela Hunt, which is the third book in the Jerusalem Road series. I got this one at a library book sale, so I don't have the other books. Then we have The Gates of Rome, The Death of Kings, The Field of Swords, and The Gods of War by Con A. Golden, which are the four books in the Emperor series. Then we have The Secret Diaries of Charlotte Bronte by Siri James, We the Drowned by Karsten Jensen, Up from Dust by Heather Kaufman, The Maid of Fairborn Hall by Julie Clausen, The Heiress of Winterwood and A Lady of Willowgrove Hall by Sarah E. Ladd, which are the first and third books in the Whispers on the Moors trilogy. Caleb's Story by Patricia McLaughlin. The Ballad of Tom Dooley by Sharon McCrum. The House at Riverton, The Forgotten Garden, The Distant Hours, The Secret Keeper, The Clockmaker's Daughter, and Homecoming by Kate Morton, and The Queen's Man by Sharon K. Penman, which is the first book in the Justin De Quincey series. And on the shelf, the books I haven't read yet are A Woman of Words, the Emperor series, We the Drowned, Up from Dust, A Lady at Willowgrove Hall, House at Riverton, Homecoming, and The Queen's Man. All right, on this shelf, we'll be finishing up historical fiction. I have a few contemporaries and then moving into the mystery thriller section. So on this shelf, we have Dragon's Lair by Sharon K. Penman, which is the third book in the Justin De Quincey series. The Lost Queen by Signe Pike, which is the first book in the Lost Queen trilogy. The Help by Catherine Stockett. Beneath a Scarlet Sky by Mark Sullivan. The Sky Stone, The Singing Sword, and The Sorcerer Metamorphosis by Jack White, which are the first, second, and sixth books in the Camelot Chronicles. And that finishes out historical fiction. So of these books, the ones I haven't read are Dragon's Lair, Beneath a Scarlet Sky, The Singing Sword, and The Sorcerer. On to the very short contemporary section, we have Speak by Laurie Halsey Anderson, The Truth About Forever, What Happened to Goodbye, and Saint Anything by Sarah Dessen, and I have read all of these. All right, last but not least, we have the mystery thrillers in this section, although I think in this particular section they're all mysteries. We have The Secret Book and Scone Society by Ellery Adams, which is the first book in its series. The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, which is the first book in its series. Then we have The Secret Adversary, The Harlequin Tea Set, which is a short story collection. The Perils of Poirot, which includes The ABC Murders, Cat Among the Pigeons, Murder on the Links, and Peril at End House. Then Postmark Murder, which includes Nemesis, A Caribbean Mystery, both of which are Miss Marple mysteries, as well as Appointment with Death and Murder in Mesopotamia, which are Poirot mysteries. And Then There Were None, Five Little Pigs, and Black Coffee. I'm pretty sure Black Coffee is a Hercule Poirot. I don't know about Five Little Pigs. And all of these are by Agatha Christie. And the ones on this shelf in the mysteries that I haven't read are The Secret Book and Scone Society, The Inheritance Games, Five Little Pigs, and Black Coffee. All right, this section will finish up my mystery thriller section and get into all of the other stuff that doesn't really fit into the other categories. So, first we have 3 by Ted Decker, The Girl Behind the Red Rope by Ted and Rachel Decker, Garden of Beasts by Jeffrey Deaver, Vanish by Irene Hannon, and The Line Between by Tosca Lee. And the ones I haven't read of the mystery thrillers are 3 and The Girl Behind the Red Rope. Now onto the other section, which is mostly graphic novels and manga, but there are a couple other things on there as well. We have Snow White with the Red Hair, Volumes 1 and 2, Full Metal Alchemist, Volumes 1 through 6, a Macbeth graphic novel version. It's more in the style of manga. This little book here, which is Flight of August by Lawrence Eby. To Be or Not to Be by Ryan North, which is a choose your own adventure based on Hamlet. A Secret Voice, Volumes 6 and 7, because those are the 2 volumes my library didn't have. The Sherlock Holmes Escape Book. Lightfall, Volume 1, which is The Girl in the Galdurian by Tim Probert. I have Volume 2 currently out on loan. The Shakespeare Notebooks. I don't remember the author of this one. and it doesn't say. And a graphic novel version of The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. So of all of those, the ones I haven't read are Snow White with the Red Hair, either volume, the Sherlock Holmes Escape Book, and the Doctor Who, the Shakespeare Notebooks. All right, the last in this section are writing books mostly. I do have A Hobbit, A Wardrobe, and a Great War by Joseph LeConte, which is a nonfiction book about C.S. Lewis and Tolkien and the effect that their time in the Great War had on their writing. And then I have just a few writing books as well. I'm not going to go into nonfiction today, so we'll just leave those. All right, and then the last of the books we're going to talk about today are my middle grades. I do have another bookshelf with more middle grades on them, so I'll show you that in just a minute. But these are the ones that I have on my black bookshelves. So the books I have on this shelf are The One and Only Ivan by Catherine Applegate, The Lost Years and the Seven Songs, the first two books in the Merlin series by T.A. Barron, Book Scavengers and The Unbreakable Code by Jennifer Chambliss Burtman, which are the first two books in the Book Scavenger trilogy, The Time Travelers by Buckley Archer is all I can see, and I don't remember the name, which is book 1 in its series. How to Get Away with Myrtle and Cold-Blooded Myrtle by Elizabeth C. Bunce, which are the second and third books in the Myrtle Hardcastle Mysteries. First book is currently out on loan. Flunked and Charmed by Jen Kalanita, which are the first two books in the Fairy Tale Reform School series. The Wishing Spell and The Enchantress Returns, which are the first two books in the Land of Stories series. Absolutely Normal Chaos and Walk Two Moons by Saren Creech, and then The Scene Stone, At the Crossing Places, and King of the Middlemarch by Kevin Crossley Holland, which are the three books in the Arthur trilogy. And on this shelf, the books I haven't read are The One and Only Ivan, The Time Travelers, Cold-Blooded Myrtle, the two Land of Stories books, and I believe that's it. All right, so these are my middle grade shelves. There's only 3 of them on here, and some of these are technically books for the kids, but let's go ahead and get started. All right, so for the books on this shelf, we have Matilda and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by Roald Dahl, The City of Ember, and The People of Sparks by Jean Duprow, which are the first 2 books in the Book of Ember series, D, A Tale of Two Worlds by Michelle Faber, Inkheart by Cornelia Funke, which is the first book in its series, and The Thief Lord, also by Cornelia Funke. The Camelot Spell, Morgaine's Revenge, and The Shadow Companion by Laura Ann Gilman, which are the 3 books in the Grail Quest trilogy. Mr. Limoncello's Library, and Escape from Mr. Limoncello's Library, and Mr. Limoncello's All-Star Breakout Game by Chris Grabenstein, which are the first and I believe 5th book in the Mr. Limoncello series. Winter House, The Secrets of Winter House, and The Winter House Mysteries by Ben Gooderson, which are the 3 books in the Winter House trilogy. The Hero's Guide to Saving Your Kingdom by Christopher Healy, which is book 1 in its series. The Van Gogh Deception by, I think it's Devin Hicks, which is the first book in its series. Redwall and Mossflower, which are the first 2 books in the Redwall series. Peril at Owl Park and The Dead Man in the Garden by Martha Jocelyn, which are the second and third books in the Aggie Morton Mystery Queen series. The first book's currently out on loan. This book here is Lone Wolf by Reka Clausen. Then we have A Wizard Named Nell and The Wizard's Apprentice by Jackie French Kohler, which are the first 2 books in the Keepers trilogy. And then A Wrinkle in Time, A Wind in the Door, A Swiftly Tilting Planet, and Many Waters by Madeleine L'Engle, which I believe these 3 books are the first 3 in the Wrinkle in Time series, and Many Waters is connected to this as well as other series of hers. Ella Enchanted by Gail Carson Levine, which is the first book in its trilogy. And then the last 3 books, the numbers look wrong, but that's because I put them in release order, and they are The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Prince Caspian, and The Voyage of the Dawn Treader by C.S. Lewis, which are the first 3 books chronologically in the Chronicles of Narnia series. And of the books on these shelves, I have not read Matilda, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, The People of Sparks, The Thief Lord, Morgaine's Revenge or The Shadow Companion, Mr. Limoncello's All-Star Breakout Game, The Hero's Guide to Saving Your Kingdom, The Van Gogh Deception, Mossflower, The Dead Man in the Garden, A Wind in the Door, A Swiftly Tilting Planet, or Many Waters. Alright, on the next shelf down, we first have the rest of the Chronicles of Narnia series with The Silver Chair, The Horse and His Boy, The Magician's Nephew, and The Last Battle. Then we have The Princess and the Goblin by George MacDonald. Then we have a long series, The Merchant of Death, The Lost City of Far, The Never War, The Reality Bug, Blackwater, The Rivers of Ziddah, The Quillen Games, The Pilgrims of Rain, Raven Rise, and The Soldiers of Hala by D.J. MacHale, which are all of the books in the Pendragon series. And no, this is not Pendragon based on Arthurian legend. This is a different Pendragon. Then we have Keeper of the Lost Cities by Shannon Messenger, which is the first book in its series. Blue Crown by Kate Milford, which is considered on Goodreads to be the 3rd book in the Greenglass House series, but it actually comes before all of the other books, from what I understand. Then we have Mark of the Thief by Jennifer A. Nielsen, which is book 1 in its series. Memories and Life Lessons from the Magic Treehouse by Mary Pope Osborne. On the Edge of the Dark Sea of Darkness by Andrew Peterson, which is the first book in the Wingfeather saga. Finding Fortune by Delia Ray. The 39 Clues, The Maze of Bones by Rick Riordan, which is the first book in the 39 Clues series. And then the first 3 Harry Potter books, Sorcerer's Stone, Chamber of Secrets, and Prisoner of Azkaban by J.K. Rowling. The books that I hadn't read are The Princess and the Goblin, Keeper of the Lost Cities, Blue Crown, Mark of the Thief, Memories and Life Lessons from the Magic Treehouse, On the Edge of the Dark Sea of Darkness, Finding Fortune, and The Maze of Bones. Alright, the final shelf at last. We have the last 4 Harry Potter books. So Goblet of Fire, Order of the Phoenix, Half-Blood Prince, and The Deathly Hallows by J.K. Rowling. Then we have The Shadow Cipher by Bad with Names, Laura Ruby, which is the first book in the York series, or York trilogy. Holes by Lois Satcher, The Bad Beginning, the first book in a series of unfortunate events by Lemony Snicket. The Emerald Atlas, The Fire Chronicle, The Black Reckoning by John Stevens, which are the 3 books in the Books of Beginning trilogy. Pyramid Hunters, The Iron Tomb by Peter Vegas, which is the first book in its series. Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson. Dealing with Dragons by Patricia C. Rede. I have no idea how to say that. Which is the first book in its series. The Emperor's Riddle by Kate Zhang. 100 Secret Missions. This is purely for my kids when they get older. A Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett. The Chocolate Touch by Patrick Skeen Catling. Ramona the Pest, Ramona the Brave, Ramona Quimby, Age 8, and Ramona Forever by Beverly Cleary. Flight number 116 is Down by Carolyn B. Cooney. Because of Winn-Dixie and The Tale of Despero by Kate DiCamillo. Heartwood Hotel, Book 1, A True Home by Callie George. From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler by, I should know this one, E.L. Königsberg, excuse me. Pippi Longstocking by Astrid Lindgren. When We Were Very Young and We Are 6 by A.A. Milne. Haunted House by Peggy Parrish, which is the 3rd book in the Liza, Bill, and Jed Mysteries series. The Science Fair from the Black Lagoon. If any of you remember these books growing up, let me know. And I have books out of order again. So we have Basil of Baker Street and Basil and the Cave of Cats by Eve Titus, which are the first 2 books in the Great Mouse Detective series. And then we have finally Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. And on this shelf, the books that I haven't read are The Shadow Cipher, The Fire Chronicle, The Black Reckoning, Pyramid Hunters, The Iron Tomb, Brown Girl Dreaming, The Emperor's Riddle, The Chocolate... Nope, I haven't read it, but it was read to me. Ignore that one. Because of Winn-Dixie, A True Home, Pippi Longstocking, When We Were Very Young, We Are Now 6, and Basil and the Cave of Cats. I feel like I have a book hiding back here. There we go. So those are all of the books on my shelves. Let me know if there are any that you would like to see me get to soon, or if there are any that you are particularly excited for me to get to. There will be one more video on Monday to wrap up the 6-video series, and then we'll be in our regular schedule, which is every Monday and even numbered Thursday. So I will see you then.